No problem. Just a quick question around the table. Does anyone know how to get a hand on the last version of the draft?
Но мы постараемся это сделать. И, ну, по крайней мере, ну, опубликовать, может быть, не удастся, но те, кто захочет, мы поделимся этой версией закона.
Насколько?
Okay. Well, we had a request actually.
Я вложусь. Спасибо большое. Одновременно приходится быть в двух местах. Это сложно. Центр коммерческого права не занимается земельной реформой непосредственно, но в то же время мы занимаемся рядом вопросов, которые так или иначе связаны и с земельной реформой в том числе. В частности, двумя сферами наших интересов является это защита права собственности, в том числе и в сфере земельных отношений. И второе – это снижение коррупционных рисков и коррупционных потенциалов, принимаемых парламентом Украины законодательных актов. В этой связи нами разработаны положения изменения в действующее в Украине законодательство, связанные с продажей земли, с процедурой продажи. Моратории на отчуждение земли в свое время были введены не случайно, и если мы помним, то они вводились именно для того, чтобы обеспечить возможность разработки и принятия тех законодательных актов, которые позволят продавать землю на рыночных условиях, в прозрачных процедурах и, главное, обеспечат стабильность сделок, заключенных в этих процедурах. Стабильность заключенных в этих процедурах сделок влияет на уровень защиты права собственности. Если инвестор покупает землю и впоследствии теряет это имущество, это неправильно и такого быть не должно. Это не рыночные условия осуществления деятельности. В связи с этим Центром коммерческого права и нашими экспертами разработаны законодательные инициативы, которые направлены на урегулирование этой сферы отношений. И главная идея заключается в том, что земля должна продаваться на аукционе. Аукцион должен быть открытым, прозрачным. Аукцион должен иметь возможность осуществлять продажу как на повышение цены, так и на понижение цены. Одна из главных проблем – это определение стоимости земли. Так вот, стоимость земли может быть определена только на аукционе. Все другие способы проведения оценок, они так или иначе имеют определенный коррупционный потенциал. Как правило, сделки, заключенные на таких, как у нас их называют, конкурсах, очень часто обжалуются в судах, и это приводит к тому, что заключенные договоры признаются недействительными. Соответственно, возникает вопрос того, что инвестор лишается своих денег, и инвестор лишается своего имущества. Естественно, эта процедура позволяет, с одной стороны, подороже продать, если есть спрос на землю, если спрос на эту землю невелик, и, соответственно, она не так велика ее рентабельность и привлекательность для инвестора, то продажа на понижение все равно позволяет найти более эффективного собственника для данной земли. В связи с этим это основной месседж, это основная идея. И естественно, что мы следим и готовы принимать участие в любых рабочих группах, круглых столах, для того, чтобы обеспечить возможность минимизации коррупционного потенциала, который на сегодняшний день, к сожалению, закладывается в те процедуры, которые будут осуществляться после снятия моратория. И, естественно, мы являемся не сторонниками, мягко скажем, так называемой венгерской модели, то есть модели при продаже через единый центр. Процедуры продажи земли должны быть открытыми, они должны быть рыночными, и земля, купленная в этих процедурах, должна найти эффективного собственника, его право собственности должно быть стабильным и защищенным.
The law that you were talking about on the auction sale of everything, really, land and other things, that was removed from the agenda of Parliament last week. Has it been
Нет,
raised?
это не идет речь об этих законодательных инициативах. Да. То есть это, скажем так, система норм, которая разработана, она в разных вариантах, были попытки имплементировать в те или иные законодательные акты. На сегодняшний день в парламенте это не находит поддержки.
And can you please repeat your last points about the selling of land has to be open, market-based, and what was your third point?
Стабильность сделок, то есть эти сделки, которые заключены с землей, должны быть стабильными. Это обеспечивает защиту права собственности инвестора.
Что значит стабильные, да?
Стабильные, то есть должно быть снижено, должно быть максимально снижено или минимизирована возможность признания в судебном порядке сделок недействительными.
Can I have a comment to?
Yes, of course. This is an open conversation. It's a dialogue.
I suppose that in every reform we have a lot of details. Можно? Я уже по-русски. But there are things which are sort of common for every, and the problems common for everyone. For instance, the words which we have just said, the corruption possibility, yes, and the protection of the property rights. These two things are extremely important. They are in every legislation of Ukraine, and I don't think we can do anything serious trying to change it and to start thinking about this in this particular legislation, not being aware that it is in every other law. Lobbying, whichever legislation you take, no definition of violation, no connection to the punishment. So our legislation is not, and we are talking all the time about our laws are very good, but they are not implemented. Laws are not the beautiful guidelines for good life. Laws are limitations, prohibition. This is not allowed, this is not possible, this is... so if you don't have these things... But there's one important thing about Ukrainian legislation. We have inherited the concept of legislation from the Soviet Union. It is the same in Kazakhstan, it is the same in Belarus, it is the same in Russia. When you have absolute power, you don't need rule of law, you need rule of power. That means that you will have no definition of violation and no clear punishment, never. We translated American, I think it is the best for the public servants, the best I have seen in any other legislations in any democratic countries, this table of punishments, which is called not punishment but some other word which you have. And it is so detailed, and it is first attempt, second attempt, third attempt, and so what happens if you just think of doing it, and then if you do it second time, and so on. So that's why we were thinking that we need the market, but this chaos of which we have heard from Link partner, yes, will be indispensable, and Roland talked about it, for these several reasons. The rights of those who are already in the market, the property rights protected, right, and the punishment for violation of the laws which are, but that punishment has to be in the law, and we have to look into that, and I think it has to be a special work on that. Do we have, because we can have very good ideas, very good sort of things, rules, something written out, but then if nobody is punished for violating it, or nobody knows how it is punished, then there's no risk. This is our corruption problem, the only one. We did this announcement. So I would like to insist on that.
Можно тоже...
Okay. Vita have been waiting patiently for a while to say something, so let's give the word to Vita. Dmitro, do you still want to? Yeah. Okay, he's been indicating, and then Natalia and Andrei, and then...
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of us that the civil sector is not an artificial something, but an indispensable partner of the reform process. That was ICP's idea all the time, and I do I'm very glad that it is happening now. Now on the presentation I just heard, I have some short feedback. The first point would be is that we are to define very concretely the starting point where we are now, because I've heard a lot of info and it's very useful, but what I didn't hear is that what is the starting point? Do we have land market now? Do we have no market, or we have a market which is corrupted? And if we start from the point that it is a corrupted land market, then it is a corrupted land market. And let's estimate the size of that. Let's estimate the interested or stakeholder of this corrupted market. Because I think, or I guess that this is the most powerful stakeholder. And it is not mentioned in the stakeholders in the presentation. How we should think about that, how to approach, how to fight, how to cooperate, etc., etc. But without defining the enemy or the main barrier in that process, there is a high risk that it would be a theory with no practical results. That's my first point. And the second point is that I would agree that there is no direct EU commitments on land reform. However, I would focus your attention on the issues that are cross-cutting for us to be EU approximated country. It's state delivery aid procedures, it's protection of all, it's everything that Pani Vera already said, but it is connected to EU commitments, and we should not forget that.
Thank you for saying that, Vita. Actually, I had that noted in my questions, that even though there is no specific EU harmonization acquis on land reform, it comes about property rights, it talks about state functioning and good governance, and these are all EU requirements.
Cross-cutting, cross-sectoral, which would be of great help in land reform as well.
And not forget that many of the investors who are waiting for the moratorium to be lifted would be coming from the European countries, so they would have if not direct but indirect influence on how the EU reacts to it.
Well, if there's foreign ownership, which is everything, but anyway.
Okay, great points. Mitro, please.
If I may. Actually, I want to comment on the point about who is advocating land reform, because it was very good message. The main initiator of the reform is the president administration. It's not the cabinet, because the cabinet is just something like they do what president says. And the point was absolutely correct, that all of us are afraid of this law, because well, it was a good message. There could be a disappointment, and you know, the result of this land market could be very disappointing for Ukrainians. Everyone, I've heard a lot of discussions about possibility of monopolizing, creating large areas of land for some actually private entities like already rich families. And what I want to say about this, actually I have been working for almost 8 years in policy advice. And our main target was to produce some products for the cabinet, for different ministries, and effectively it didn't work. They were very polite, they were listening to what we are talking, yeah, they said it's very useful, perfectly, that's nice, but it didn't work. For many years, the same recommendations, the same messages, and as a result, they were, you know, the decision making was ruled by some internal business interests. I think in this situation with land market, that will be the same point. And my conclusion at this point, I think that you mentioned that you may disappoint us. Actually, everyone knows that how it happens.
Okay.
And it's very important, especially for international project, to start talking openly. how it works. Because, for instance, when some Ukrainian players are talking, you will be blamed to be corrupt, some political party paid to you. But if such messages come from international players, it's absolutely different perception. You know, recent package of some changes, recent package of, let's say, not policy changes, let's assume that was reforms, came after, maybe I'm wrong, but it came after harsh critique from Western institutions about corruption, about poor business environment, etc. That's one point. Another point, it's very good that we gather together and discuss these issues. We need to talk. It's important. But what is much more important, to talk to people who will be affected. Because, you know, it's very difficult to explain to people that they will be affected negatively if they do not understand what is going on. Actually, I communicate with people who are well educated, and they ask me to explain what is happening with all these reforms, because they do not understand. You know, even this story with recent article about boycott. It's clear corrupt case. Yeah. But he explained it easily, and now you cannot understand was it true or not if you're not a specialist. So my second message, we need to not only to discuss it internally, but start talking to people, maybe writing articles, more this information to people. Actually, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick reaction to that, Mitro. Your points are very well taken, and this is exactly the type of advice and suggestions we would look from all of you. But your first point was that only external pressure works, or that's the
It's
that's
not
the, no, that's the
efficient.
most efficient. But then you also said that we need to talk to people who are most affected. External people would never be able to do that.
No.
It's only Ukrainians can talk to Ukrainians. Natalia.
First of all, I have a question about the draft law on land market, and depending on the answer yes or no, I'll provide some comment. So the question is, does this draft law foresee some separate special entries concerning the land situation in Crimea, which has quite a few specificities, which wasn't considered by all previous legislation framework, and because of this continues to be a major source of conflict in Crimea. So are there some separate provisions about the land market in Crimea?
Мы видели только второй драфт, и там не было никаких ограничений, точнее отдельно Республика Крым не выделялась.
So it's what I actually anticipated, and it's a great pity because it means that not only the situation will continue to develop negatively, but it will be aggravated by if the new law will be adopted. This is the first issue. Second issue is, as perhaps all of you know, Crimea pretends to be a successful example of pilot project for EU-Ukraine cooperation, modernization, reformation, etc. More of that, I should tell you that, however surprising it can seem, it looks like regional Crimean government indeed tries to deal with corruption, to overcome it, to make more transparent and inland issues. They already implement auction scheme for land trade. So it is a little bit ahead of the whole Ukraine, despite the absence of concrete legislation, norms and standards. if all these specificities, what is already done, what research on the specificity of land issue in Crimea is already done and needs to be done more, then it will be complete failure. So the place for civil society under such circumstances and situation. First, I believe that we should say a word about the necessity to introduce into the draft law some separate provisions concerning specificity of land issue in Autonomous Republic of Crimea, taking into account, you know, a lot of different aspects of this. Second, I believe that the very fact that Crimea is a separate subject of land relations and land market was not even mentioned, not to tell, addressed by the presentation, is telling by itself. So, I believe that a separate research should be... No. Sorry, Pani Nina, I can tell you in more detail, but it perhaps will take too much time. I can do it separately. So, the separate research on land issue in Crimea should be contracted. And it will be not very new time and energy taking, because such a lot of work has been already done. Excellent, detailed research by the UNDP Crimea. More of that, within the framework of this EU-initiated project, there is a separate dialogue on land issue. A lot of different approaches, case studies, recommendations is already elaborated. It is of vital importance to somehow to coordinate these different activities, at least to be aware of what is done by other stakeholders to have a cumulative positive effect. I can of course continue, but I believe that maybe it's already enough for this format.
Thank you, Natalia.